Hey everybody, and welcome back to Front-End Expert. In this video, we will be discussing the box sizing CSS property. So here in this example, we have a div with the ID of container, and inside of that div, we have an h1 with the text of container, and then we have another div with the ID of child and an h2 that says child. And if we come over to the styles.css, you can see the CSS file for this output. The container has a width of 300 pixels, and that background color of light blue. And then the child also has a width of 100%, so the entire size of the container, and then it has a border of 10 pixels solid black, a padding of 12 pixels, and a background color of orange. But then if we look at the output, the child is overflowing from the container. So what's happening here? We set the width to 100%, which should say 100% of the size of the container. But the issue is, setting the width to 100% sets the width of the content. But in addition to this content, we have 10 pixels of border and 12 pixels of padding. And because this is on each side, we actually have 20 total pixels of border, 10 pixels on the left and 10 pixels on the right. And we have 24 pixels of padding, 12 on the left and 12 on the right. So this is causing our child to overflow because this isn't being accounted for in the width. And we could solve this using the calc function. So calc allows us to add, subtract, multiply, and divide values of different units. So I could say 100% minus 20 pixels for the border minus 24 pixels for the padding. And this would end up working. This does what we want, but this is kind of gross. This is not very clean code. And now we have these values that are hard-coded to these other values. And we will see in the CSS variables video how we can avoid hard-coding all of these values, but it's still not very clean code. So how else could we solve this? And the solution is the box sizing property. So I will set this back to 100%. And then we can use the box sizing property. And what the box sizing property does is it says, should we use the width and height of the content or all the way out to the edge of the border? So here, if we set this to box sizing content box, this is the default, and it's not going to change anything because of the fact that the size of the box, so the size of the width, is affecting the width of just the content. However, we can change this to border box, which simply says that the width and height now contain the padding as well as the border. So this value of width 100% is now the equivalent of what we did before. It is just automatically subtracting the width of the border and the width of the padding for us. So width 100% is no longer 300 pixels. It is now the equivalent of 300 pixels minus 20 pixels minus 24 pixels. Now, some people love border box and think it's just a much cleaner box sizing, whereas other people like the content box and prefer to use that method and only switch to border box when they need it. But a very common CSS rule set you will see will be to have the universal selector and just set the entire page to use box sizing border box, which will allow us to not need this property here. And then in the scenario where you might need a content box, you could switch it back. But again, it's up to you if you prefer to have this set for every single property, or if you want to just set it individually when you need it. However, if you're coming into a project that other people had already been working on, I would recommend checking to see what their box sizing property is set to right before you start doing any CSS work, because you need to know how your widths and your heights are going to be calculated. And with that, that's going to be the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.